Chapter 2. 25 years later. 1. In the heart of Metropolis Park, under the gentle embrace of the mid-morning sun, the city's pulsating energy seemed to converge. The park, a lush oasis amidst the urban sprawl, thrummed with life. Joggers, their footsteps rhythmic and steady, carved paths along the winding trails. Each breath they exhaled mingled with the crisp air, a testament to their exertion and vitality. Nearby, a dog walker navigated the landscape with a kaleidoscope of leashes in hand, each tethered to a dog of varying size and temperament. Amidst this mosaic of movement, a couple strolled, hands intertwined, lost in their own world. Clark Kent, amidst this tableau of park life, felt an odd sense of detachment. Dressed in clothes that mirrored the city's casual yet sophisticated vibe, he was the embodiment of an urban 25-year-old. His attire was understated yet impeccable. A charcoal gray t-shirt, understated and fitting, that complemented his casual look, paired with dark jeans that tapered gracefully to his shoes. Despite his attire aligning perfectly with the city's sartorial heartbeat, Clark couldn't shake off the feeling of being an outlier, an observer standing on the periphery of a world that moved in rhythms that had yet to welcome him in. Clark walked down a path, the large paper bag in his hand crinkling with each step. He had recently bought it from a nearby coffee shop. Its contents were more than a morning indulgence. Inside were pastries and breakfast sandwiches, the sweet aroma mingling with the scent of freshly baked bread. It was more food than he could eat himself. In a more secluded area of the park, he noticed a woman sitting by herself. In her 30s, her features were a striking mix, telling a story of diverse heritage. Her hair, a cascade of dark waves, framed a face marked by the rigors of life. There was a certain ruggedness to her beauty, like a painting that had weathered storms yet retained its allure. Her eyes, a deep brown, held a look of quiet resignation, a mirror to the hardship etched in the fine lines at their corners. Her clothes were worn and spoke of better days. She sat alone on the bench, her posture that of someone accustomed to the weight of the world. Clark approached her, his footsteps light on the gravel. "Do you mind if I share the bench with you?" he asked, his voice casual. Without waiting for a response, he sat down at the opposite end of the bench. The paper bag rustled in his hands. She glanced around, her gaze sweeping across the park. It was impossible not to notice the half-dozen other benches scattered in the vicinity, all unoccupied. Yet here he was, sharing her space. Clark, undeterred by her apparent discomfort, set the paper bag down between them and opened it. He pulled out a ham and cheese croissant, its flaky crust giving way to the warm, savory filling inside. He began to eat, his actions deliberate. Feeling encroached upon, she stood up, her movements tinged with irritation. As she began to walk away, a moment of hesitation crept in. She turned back to face him, her eyes holding a mix of defiance and need. "Can you spare $20? She asked, her voice betraying the desperation she tried to mask. Clark swallowed a bite of his croissant, then replied with a mild, almost playful tone. "No cash on me, I'm afraid." She eyed the sandwiches in the bag, her gaze lingering. $10? She ventured, a hint of bargaining in her voice. He smiled gently, still maintaining the lightness in his tone. "Still no cash on me. But," he gestured to the bag, "I do have an abundance of breakfast here. Care to join me?" His offer hung in the air. She let out a dismissive grunt, her expression a mix of skepticism and annoyance, then turned to walk away. "You see, I've got all these pastries," Clark called after her, his voice calm and friendly. She pivoted back towards him, suspicion etched on her face. "What are you, some kind of creep?" she asked, her tone edged with wariness. "Nope, but I can't eat all this by myself," he replied, his demeanor unshaken by her accusation. "That's exactly what a creep would say," she countered, her eyes narrowing. "Would you feel better if we sat at a picnic table?" Clark suggested, pointing towards one nearby. "No," she said, settling back onto the bench with a huff, her attitude firmly in place. "Take what you want," Clark offered, gesturing towards the bag. She hesitated for a moment, then dug into the bag, tearing the wax paper off another sandwich with a certain resignation. I'm Clark, he said, trying to ease the tension as she ate amidst the rustling wrappers. She mumbled, not looking up. Clark Kent, he added, subtly prompting her to share her name. After a pause, she relented. I'm Anne, she said, her voice softening ever so slightly. Nice to meet you, Anne. I should get this out there. I'm a reporter, Clark said, watching her reaction closely. She stopped mid-bite, her eyes widening. Ah, man, she exclaimed, disappointment lacing her words. She stood up abruptly, her movements quick. I'm keeping this, she declared, snatching the whole bag of food. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Clark sitting alone on the bench, a half-eaten croissant in his hand. Anne, I want to hear your story. I'm not going to write about you, but you have information I need. I publish on an independent news site, and this is part of a much bigger investigation, Clark said, his voice steady and sincere. Have a nice day, she replied, her tone dripping with sarcasm, as she waved her fingers dismissively and continued walking away. Undaunted, Clark stood up and followed, catching up to walk beside her. Look, he said, his tone earnest. I've pieced together the broad strokes. Some bad people manipulated you. That's not your fault. This whole thing is my fault, she scoffed, her voice tinged with self-reproach. No, Clark countered, his voice firm yet compassionate. If I could prove that, if I could help you, protect you, would you talk to me then? I don't need anyone to protect me, she declared, her voice resolute, embodying a strength born of adversity. Clark, walking alongside her, continued. It's not always about needing protection, he offered. Sometimes it's about having someone who believes in your story, who wants to help set things right. Let me be that person, Miss Vaidya. At the mention of her last name, she stopped in her tracks, her expression shifting to one of surprise and caution. There's a place you can go where you'll be safe, Clark continued, gesturing subtly to her disheveled state, and a place that will help you recover. I don't know you from Adam, she retorted, her guard visibly up. Sure you do, he said with a friendly grin. Like I told you, I'm Clark Kent. Clark gestured towards another bench, suggesting they sit. Okay, she replied softly, her resistance waning slightly. The park around them was still and empty, a quiet backdrop to their conversation. He took out a small notepad from his back pocket and opened it. Tell me your story, he said. 2. Metropolis, sprawling and magnificent, loomed as an urban giant, its towering skyline and vibrant streets a testament to its status as one of the largest and most well-known cities in the world. Along its picturesque Metropolis harbor waterfront, set against the backdrop of the bustling city, was the renowned Star Labs. This expansive facility stood as a beacon of innovation and progress, a focal point of scientific discovery and ingenuity. Star Labs was more than just a laboratory, it was a symbol of the future. One part of the facility was a maze of cutting-edge research, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. The other part housed a marvel of clean energy, an innovative, one-of-a-kind reactor whose design was as breathtaking as it was efficient. Its iconic architecture, marrying functionality with aesthetic grandeur, rivaled the most visited landmarks around the globe. In the heart of Metropolis, a city that epitomized the pinnacle of urban development, Star Labs stood proudly, a testament to human aspiration and the endless possibilities of tomorrow. Within, the corridors of the lab unfurled like streams of crystalline thought, their surfaces polished until they gleamed with the promise of the future. The air was alive with the electric scent of potential. Every corner and curve of the facility whispered of wonders, yet to be unveiled. In this place, the impossible was simply the uncharted, and every shadow cast within its walls seemed charged with secrets, with the anticipation of some great truth about to unfold. Beneath the gleaming exterior of Star Labs, far removed from the prying eyes of the public, lay a realm shrouded in secrecy. Deep within the facility's subterranean levels was a top-secret laboratory, its existence known only to a select few. In this hidden space, away from the light of day and the buzz of the city above, lay the heart of Star Labs' groundbreaking innovations. Unknown to the outside world, The contents of this relatively modest room were the catalysts for advancements that seemed to border on the miraculous. It was mid-morning, and Emil Hamilton was alone in the room, surrounded by the hum of technology and the palpable aura of discovery. He stood there in contemplation, wrestling with a problem that challenged even his brilliant mind. His gaze was fixed on the tablet in his hands, his fingers moving deftly across its surface, but his thoughts were elsewhere, reaching into realms of possibilities and theories. He looked up, his attention straying from the digital world in his hands. There, in the center of the room and bathed in artificial light, sat the object that had captivated his attention ever since its dramatic arrival on Earth, the alien ship. Situated on a raised platform, the craft was both mesmerizing and enigmatic, its design unlike anything known to human engineering. It was small, sleek, and undeniably otherworldly, its surfaces smooth and reflecting the brilliant lights of the lab. Emil stepped up onto the platform, his hands lightly touching the hull of the alien ship. He felt the unusual texture beneath his fingers, a reminder of the night 25 years ago that had altered the course of his life. As he studied the ship's contours, a blend of awe and deep curiosity filled his expression. This craft was not merely an extraterrestrial vehicle. It embodied a puzzle, an enigma, encased in metal, harboring secrets that could propel humanity into a new epoch of knowledge. For Emil, this encounter was not just a scientific endeavor. It was a personal odyssey, born from that transformative night, a pursuit that had given him a purpose, a goal to strive for in his career. Standing there in the silent isolation of the lab, with the spacecraft before him, Emil felt an overwhelming connection to something beyond himself, a bridge to an expanse of knowledge yet to be explored. The room, usually a haven for quiet study and introspection, had become the epicenter of an uncharted universe of possibilities. At the heart of this cosmic potential was Emil Hamilton, profoundly shaped by a singular event from his past, now poised to unlock the secrets that lay within this otherworldly visitor. Across the room, at a separate workstation, lay the artifact that had forever changed Emil's path. The intricate, softball-sized orb that had blown off the ship during its fiery descent, propelled by the missile impact. By sheer fate, it had landed at his feet that night, an unexpected gift from the cosmos. Emil had kept the artifact's secret for years, a personal treasure that served as tangible proof of the extraordinary. It was his link to a night that had redirected the trajectory of his entire life. In those early days, Emil had been consumed by a relentless drive to uncover the truth behind the ship. He had worked tirelessly, dedicating himself to his studies and research, always striving to prove his worth. His dedication and exceptional skill eventually opened doors that few even knew existed. Opportunities emerged, leading him closer to the answers he sought. And when he finally learned about the fate of the ship, when he was granted access to work with and study it, it felt like a destiny fulfilled. In all the years since the ship had landed, no one had been able to unlock its secrets. Its technology, its purpose, and its origins had remained enigmatic, a puzzle that seemed beyond human comprehension. But Emil was different. With the artifact as his guide, he had begun to piece together the mysteries of the ship. His unique perspective and unwavering focus had allowed him to make connections that others had missed. Now, in the quiet of the lab, surrounded by the culmination of his life's work, Emil felt a deep sense of accomplishment and wonder. The artifact, once a mysterious relic, had become a key, unlocking the vast potential and knowledge contained within the ship. Unexpectedly, the tranquility of the lab was disrupted as the lights flickered, casting brief shadows across the walls. The screens that displayed intricate data and diagrams of the ship blinked in unison, momentarily plunging the room into darkness. This sudden interruption shook Emil out of his deep reverie, snapping him back to the present. Puzzled and slightly alarmed, Emil moved quickly across the room to a console. He tapped on a large screen mounted on the wall, initiating a call to the control room. His fingers moved with practiced ease, but his brow furrowed in concern. Such interruptions were rare. "Control, this is Hamilton. We just had a power fluctuation down here. Any idea what's going on?" he said. When no response came, Emil tapped the display again, but the silence that greeted him only deepened his unease. A quick diagnostic check confirmed his suspicions. The internal communication systems were down. Resolved to uncover the cause of this anomaly, Emil decided to head to the control room himself. He glanced one last time at the alien ship, its presence now seeming more ominous in the shadow of the current uncertainty. Then, with a deep breath, he turned away and stepped into the secure elevator. 8 levels above, nestled amidst corridors of innovation and discovery, was a control room, alive with the subtle yet unmistakable hum of futuristic technology. Moments later, as Emil Hamilton entered, the control room was charged with an unusual frenzy, reactor operators rushing about as they delved into the depths of potential issues, a stark contrast to its typical state of composed diligence. He had barely taken a few steps inside when an operator, with a look of urgent concern, swiftly approached him. "Sir, there's been an incident," the operator announced, breaking the rhythm of the quiet hum. "We've had a potential data breach, but the diagnostics are confusing." Emil's attention snapped to the operator, his mind shifting gears from the contemplative quiet of his lab to the immediate urgency of this new development. The term data breach in a place as secure as Star Labs was alarming enough, but paired with confusing diagnostics, it suggested a situation far from ordinary. Emil's gaze hardened. "A data breach?" Hamilton's voice was sharp, commanding. "Yes, but it's odd. There's no trace. It's as if someone ghosted through our systems. We can't find what they took, if they took anything." Hamilton's brow furrowed. "And the concern?" "We've detected unusual power readings in the reactor core. They're unexplainable." "Show me the feed on the reactor," Hamilton ordered, his mind already racing through possibilities. Hamilton strode toward the cluster of monitors with a purposeful gait, his eyes quickly locking onto the live feed of the reactor core. The diagnostic readouts, flickering across the screens, were deceptively calm, all within expected ranges. Yet something about them didn't sit right with him. It was as if the reactor, usually a beacon of stability, was subtly disguising an unseen anomaly. His gaze traced the lines of data and fluctuating graphs, searching for the slightest deviation that might explain the unease gnawing at him. To anyone else, the numbers and charts would suggest business as usual. But Hamilton's trained eyes discerned an unsettling undercurrent beneath the surface normalcy. This vague inkling whispered of a deeper concern lurking within the heart of the reactor. Hamilton's phone vibrated sharply, breaking his concentration. He glanced at the screen and answered. "Dr. Hamilton here." "Dr. Hamilton, the students have arrived and are waiting in the reactor observatory. Will you still be able to meet with them?" a voice inquired from the other end. Emil paused, his mind weighing the current predicament against the appointment. For a moment, he considered canceling, his focus deeply entrenched in the unfolding mystery of the reactor. But then, a memory surfaced, of himself as a gangly but passionate teenager, whose own aspirations in science and technology had been kindled by similar encounters. "Right. I'll be there shortly," he said into the phone without taking his eyes off the screens. And to the reactor operator, he said, "I want you to think differently, like a hacker, like a criminal. Find out what happened." "Yes, sir," came the crisp reply. Hamilton turned on his heel, leaving the control room behind. His steps were brisk, echoing down the corridors of Star Labs and over the threshold of massive steel emergency doors. Emil stepped into the grand reactor atrium, a testament to modern architecture and engineering. The vast space, encased in glass, steel, and concrete, offered a spectacular view of the futuristic reactor, a structure unparalleled anywhere in the world. The atrium's design created an illusion of openness, its immense size suggesting boundless space. Yet this feeling of freedom was subtly countered by the robust security features integrated into its design. Massive safety doors, enormous steel structures, and towering concrete pillars were strategically positioned throughout, their presence seamlessly blended by skilled architects to maintain the aesthetic appeal while ensuring the facility's safety and integrity. In this fusion of form and function, the reactor atrium stood as a symbol of Star Labs' commitment to innovation and architectural excellence. As he prepared to face the future minds of science, Hamilton's thoughts remained with the ghost in his machine, the puzzle lingering in the back of his mind, challenging the security of his world and the safety of the unknown students waiting for his words of wisdom. A motley crew of high schoolers, usually captive to the relentless pings and blue haze of their phones, had found themselves on an unexpected field trip. They were cherry-picked for their smarts, sharp kids from across Metropolis, a ragtag blend of dreamers and future tech wizards. Today, their eyes weren't glued to screens but wide open in wonder, drinking in the sights of Star Labs. Dressed in the casual armor of their age, graphic tees screaming with slogans, the ubiquitous denim, this band of unlikely comrades stepped through the high-tech fortress like they owned it. Led by a couple of teachers who were just as wowed, and a Star Labs guide who knew this place like the back of his hand, they strolled into a space that felt like it belonged in a sci-fi flick. The atrium was a marvel, buzzing with the kind of energy that had nothing to do with electricity. The kids, normally too cool for school, couldn't help but stop and stare. Hands that could text at the speed of light were now reaching out, touching holograms that popped up with a tap. These were the new textbooks, the kind you could spin, expand, and dive into. A science lesson from the future, happening right here, right now. As they walked the line between the world they knew and the world that could be, these teens weren't just kids anymore. They were pioneers, on the edge of the newest frontier, right at the moment when everything was about to change. Dr. Emil Hamilton, silhouetted against the sprawling reactor chamber visible through the towering glass wall, turned to face the group of wide-eyed students. "Fire away with those hard-hitting questions," he said, the vibrant glow from the machinery casting dramatic shadows across his features. His tone was an enticing blend of invitation and dare, perfectly in tune with the awe-inspiring spectacle that surrounded them. A girl with neon green hair stripes stood up. "Dr. Hamilton, this is incredible and all, but how'd you even start something like this?" Hamilton stroked his chin. "It all began with, 'What if?' Those two words launched 1,000 sleepless nights, and this," he gestured around, "is where we landed." Hamilton caught the gaze of the curious students, his eyes alight with the fire of a visionary. "Imagine harnessing the very forces that power the stars," he began, his hands moving as if he could physically draw the science from his mind into the room. "Here, we're not just talking about solar energy," he continued, pacing with the rhythm of his words. "We're tapping into the fundamental principles of fusion. At the sun's core, hydrogen atoms collide and fuse into helium, releasing energy in the process. We've developed a method to replicate that process here on Earth, in a controlled environment." A murmur of awe rippled through the room. "You mean like a mini-sun?" asked a student, squinting skeptically. "Exactly," Hamilton nodded. "A mini-sun. But instead of using hydrogen, we're using isotopes of hydrogen, like deuterium and tritium, which are abundant in seawater. We contain the reaction within a magnetic confinement, a torus-shaped chamber that is, frankly, a piece of engineering art." A hand shot up. "But isn't fusion, like, really hard to achieve?" "The hardest," Hamilton confirmed with a grin. "But we've made leaps in magnetic confinement, in laser triggering, in ionization rates. Our reactors don't just produce energy, they produce hope. Clean, sustainable, and virtually limitless. This isn't just a game changer, it's a planet saver." "Hey, is that where the name Star Labs comes from?" a student piped up, the query cutting through the hum of machinery like a laser. Hamilton paused, a small smile playing on his lips. "Good guess," he replied, his voice carrying the soft cadence of a secret being shared. "But not exactly. STAR stands for Scientific and Technological Advanced Research. It's less about celestial bodies and more about the pursuit of knowledge that's as vast as the night sky." His hands swept through the air, painting an invisible canvas before the students' eyes. Our founders were dreamers, reaching for the stars in their own way. They chose a name that promised a journey, not just into the cosmos, but into the depths of human ingenuity. Like the stars above, were a beacon in the dark, chasing the light of discovery. From the back, a voice cut through the murmurs. A boy in a faded band tee, skepticism etched onto his features, stood up. "I heard a podcast that said you found alien tech and reverse engineered this stuff. Is there an Area 51 lab under here?" Some students laughed, others leaned forward, intrigued. Hamilton matched the boy's gaze. The only alien thing here is the idea that we can't solve our own problems. No, this, he tapped a nearby computer monitor, is pure earthling brain power. But haven't there been accidents? Experiments gone wrong? Another student piped up, one eyebrow raised. We learn, we stumble, and we get up again, Hamilton said. Progress isn't a straight line, but the key is, we never stop moving forward. The green-haired girl jumped back in. And if you hit a dead end? Hamilton's eyes gleamed. Then we break down walls to make new paths. That's science. That's discovery. That's life. 3. In the adjacent control room, where the hum of computers usually provided a reassuring soundtrack of routine, the atmosphere had shifted. Technicians in lab coats moved with an urgency unbeknownst to the visitors, just one thick wall away. One young tech, her eyes wide behind thick-rimmed glasses, watched as her console lit up with a cascade of red warning signals. Graphs spiked in dissonant symphony, and error messages scrolled with unrelenting persistence. Across the room, her supervisor, a grizzled veteran with countless critical situations under his belt, leaned over her shoulder for a closer inspection. The calm choreography of his brows furrowing and the sharp intake of breath spoke volumes. Without a word, he straightened up, his hand already snatching the phone from its cradle. There was no time for discussion or doubt. The readings were clear in their chaotic testimony. With a steady voice that belied the spike of adrenaline, he issued the command to the room. Someone find Hamilton immediately. We need him here 5 minutes ago. Before anyone could react, the warning klaxons wailed, a high-pitched symphony of impending doom that drowned out all conversation. Red lights strobed, casting eerie shadows as the ground began to shake. And then, chaos incarnate. A tempest of energy within the reactor core broke free, arcing in electric whips that danced with wild abandon. The explosion that followed was a monster released from its chains, roaring with light and fury, tearing through the bowels of the building. 4. As they sat in the quiet expanse of Metropolis Park, Clark lent Anne Vidya his full attention, absorbing every word as she recounted the events of the past few months. The tale she wove was one of entrapment and a gradual descent into hopelessness. Anne, in her professional capacity, was a traffic management systems operator for the bustling city of Metropolis. Her role was critical and encompassing, involving the oversight and integration of a vast network of cameras within the transportation management system. These cameras were the city's eyes, constantly monitoring the ebb and flow of daily life, the ceaseless stream of vehicles, the steady pulse of transit systems, and the myriad paths of pedestrians navigating the urban maze. Her job, under normal circumstances, was like conducting an intricate symphony of movement, ensuring harmony and safety in the city's relentless rhythm. However, the responsibility that came with such a role was immense, and as she spoke, it became clear to Clark that the weight of her position had become a pivotal element in the unfolding drama she was ensnared in. The system Anne worked with was a fortress of digital security, designed to be impenetrable with its redundant security measures. Every interaction with the video data was meticulously tracked and monitored, creating a near-flawless record of access and activity. Shifting focus momentarily, Anne described that her descent into a world of high stakes and shadowy gambles had begun innocuously enough. She recounted how a bachelorette trip to the casinos had ignited a dormant fascination with card games and bets. The thrill of the gamble, the allure of easy money, had sparked something within her, a fire that soon grew uncontrollable. Her casual interest rapidly escalated. Larger bets, higher stakes, and the adrenaline rush of games that skirted the edge of legality became her new normal. She rode a wave of seemingly endless victories, each win fueling her confidence, her belief in her invincibility. She described fortune as a fickle friend. In a startling reversal of luck, Anne found herself on a losing streak. Within a month, her finances were decimated. Denial became her refuge. She convinced herself that the next bet, the next game, would be her salvation. the key to reclaiming her lost fortune. The revelation of her secret life of gambling hit her husband like a storm. He reacted swiftly, cutting her off financially in a desperate attempt to stem the tide of losses. But his actions did little to quell her compulsion. If anything, they drove her deeper into the abyss, her desperation mounting as she sought out new ways to feed her addiction. "I was in a dark place," Anne confessed to Clark, her voice a mere whisper against the backdrop of the park's tranquility. Clark maintained his focus on her, his expression one of attentive concern. He had already pieced together the facts about her gambling addiction from his own investigations, but he knew the importance of hearing her story firsthand. The nuances, the emotions, the personal journey, these were aspects no third-party account could fully capture. "There was a day, back at the beginning of spring," Anne continued, her gaze distant as if visualizing the scene in her mind's eye. "A guy approached me when I was coming out of a backroom poker game. I'd lost a lot of money." Clark simply nodded, understanding the power of silence in moments like these. It often encouraged people to open up, to share more than they might have initially intended. "He told me that if I did him a favor, he could have my debt taken care of. I was skeptical. He was insistent," she recalled, her voice laced with the residue of that skepticism. "In the end, I told him no." The weight of her next words seemed heavier, burdened with regret and consequence. "But I'd lost a lot of money, and that's the night my husband kicked me out." Her admission hung in the air, a stark reminder of how quickly life could spiral out of control, how a single decision could set off a chain reaction of irreversible events. "The man who made you the offer, he came back?" Clark probed gently. "He did. This time I told him yes." Anne's voice was tinged with a mixture of resignation and regret. She looked away, avoiding Clark's gaze as she delved into the darker chapters of her story. She detailed how the man had instructed her to meet with others who would provide her with a drive containing computer code. Her task was to integrate this code into the city's traffic management system. Before she went through with the installation, curiosity and caution had led her to examine the contents of the drive. With her knowledge of coding, it didn't take long for her to recognize the true nature of the software. It was a sophisticated backdoor designed to infiltrate the city's systems in a complex and undetectable manner. "The men who gave you the code," Clark pressed. "Do you remember what they looked like?"
Yeah,
"You know, my first impression was that they looked like cops," she responded. "They had that authoritative vibe about them. But I can do more than tell you what they looked like. I can show you." Clark's pen paused mid-scratch on his notepad, his attention fully on her. "Sure. I was in a desperate place," Anne continued with a dark smile. "But I'm not dumb. For my own security, I set up an old cell phone outside the cafe where we met. I used it to record the entire encounter." Clark's expression shifted, a mixture of admiration and concern crossing his features. Anne's foresight to document the meeting was a significant development, one that could go a long way towards helping the bigger story he was tracking. "And you have the video in a safe place?" Clark asked. "Yes," she said, taking a deep breath, her voice laced with a mix of hope and trepidation. "You said you can protect me, get me help for my addiction?" He flipped to a blank page in his notebook and began writing. "This is a place you can go," Clark said, as he scribbled down a name, address, and phone number. "They help people in tough situations, give them a new start, people like you." He handed the paper over to her. "You're kidding," she exclaimed, her eyes scanning the paper. "This is all the way in Kansas." "You think you're going to get better, break the habit, if you stay here?" Clark asked, his tone gentle yet firm. "I can't pay for anything," she said. "You don't have to worry about that. Tell them I sent you. We go way back, and they owe me some favors," Clark assured her. "In fact, I grew up in Kansas. I'm new to Metropolis." His words were not just an offer of help, but a beacon of hope, a chance for her to escape the cycle she was caught in and start anew. It was a lifeline, extended with the genuine desire to see her reclaim her life. Clark's attention was momentarily diverted by an unusual sound, faint yet distinctly unsettling in the calm of the morning. He scanned the surroundings, noting that he seemed to be the only one who had detected the sound. "Kansas," Anne mused, her voice a mix of incredulity and contemplation. I can't believe I'm even considering this. Miss Vaidya, Clark responded, offering a reassuring smile. I believe that you can beat this. Don't waste the chance. Anne's hands moved deftly to her shoe, and with a subtle maneuver, she produced a small thumb drive. You can have this one. I have other copies. I keep it on me as a kind of insurance policy. The sound, perceptible only to Clark, intensified in its urgency. Just as he began to raise his hand to signal for Anne to pause, the quiet of the morning was shattered. A thunderous explosion erupted, ripping through the calm like a violent storm, startling everyone around and drawing their collective attention to the source of the disturbance. Arcs of energy ripped the sky, smoke and dust billowed into the air, and the park's serenity shattered. The ground beneath them trembled as if the city's heart had skipped a beat. He looked up, and so did the world around him. Every jogger, every dog walker, every soul in the park froze as arcs of energy cascaded across the sky. A plume of smoke mushroomed in the distance in the direction of Metropolis Harbor, and the once clear blue was smeared with gray and angry red. People began to scream, a collective panic rising like a wave. In the chaos, Clark urged Anne to call the number on the paper. He apologized and turned to the plume of destruction rising over Metropolis. His journalistic instincts kicked in. He needed to get to the source of that explosion. Clark began to move towards the disaster, quickly scanning his surroundings. Anne was walking away, and everyone else's attention was fixed on the billowing smoke. Seizing the moment, he dashed away in a swift, unnoticed blur. Five. In Starlab's Grand Reactor atrium, a scene of wonder had rapidly descended into one of unimaginable horror. Tendrils of vibrant, colorful energy, sinister in their beauty, had begun to coil around the reactor, striking out with a life of their own. The sudden transformation from a marvel of science to a spectacle of terror left everyone frozen in shock. A student's scream had pierced the air, her finger pointing at the unfolding nightmare. The others, caught in the grip of helplessness, could only watch in horror. Emile, amidst the chaos, barely had time to process the catastrophe before it escalated. The containment field generator, once the stabilizing force of the reactor, had started to disintegrate, unleashing wild arcs of energy that tore through the air. The building trembled violently, its foundations quaking as if in the throes of an earthquake. Emile's shouts to evacuate were drowned out by the crashing descent of massive steel emergency doors, sealing them in a terrifying tomb. Then, the unthinkable happened. The structural integrity of the building gave way. Walls crumbled like sandcastles before a tidal wave, steel beams plummeting to the ground with deadly force. The atrium, once a symbol of safety and progress, was now a scene of utter devastation. Screams echoed through the chaos, a chorus of terror as the shockwave from the reactor's implosion knocked Emile off his feet. Darkness engulfed them, a suffocating cloak woven from dust, debris, and the acrid smell of fear. Muffled cries filled the air, a haunting reminder of the calamity that had befallen them. Pinned down on all sides, amidst the shattered remnants of what was once a beacon of human achievement, the survivors, some seriously injured, huddled together in the dark. Shrouded in the aftermath of devastation, their fate hung precariously in the balance, fear and pain etching a palpable tension in the air.